Hello and welcome to Let's Talk T2 Global Calendar. World Rugby announced its new long-term calendar last week, and I had a quick chat about it then, giving my instant reaction to it. Since then, I've had to sit down and look at it from a Tier 2 point of view, and so I want to talk about that today. Please, if you're watching live, do add any comments or questions. It's always good to have a chat, and if you watch the replay, you can tweet back, or if you're watching on YouTube, there are comments below. So, thank you for joining me. So, as I said, World Rugby made its big announcement about the new long-term global calendar, and the one big area that there was no news on from a Tier 2 point of view, hi there, WatchBoyo32, that there is no. The one big thing they didn't mention at all anyway from a Tier 2 point of view was any kind of pathway as to how they would be able to move into and become Tier 1 nations. Welsh boy, I'm going to talk about Tier 2 nations, not so much about Wales today, but catch me later for those comments on that side of things. So yeah, there's no pathway to get from Tier 1 to get from Tier 2 to Tier 1. There is no kind of way of saying, if you do this, you will get rewarded and you'll get the next step up the ladder. So Tier 2 nations really don't know what they need to do, or how they want to, or how to go about getting there. And this is not some short-term plan. This is not kind of like what's going to happen next year or the year after. This is 2020 through to 2032. I'll be dead by then. It's a long time, and if we're waiting for, thank you very much for that, the Low Mic podcast. It's a long time to wait for Tier 2 nations to learn how to become Tier 1, if we're talking about expanding the game and all that kind of stuff. So that's the big gap that's not mentioned within there. So what did they say? They mentioned that there's going to be an increase in Tier 1 versus Tier 2 games up to 110. I just went blank there, so I was going to rerun over that just in case I lost the broadcast. So they've announced 110 games minimum between Tier 1 and Tier 2, which is a 39% increase on the previous calendar. So which, doing a bit of maths, suggests the previous calendar had about 79 minimum games, and there'll be an additional 31. Now, does New Zealand's game in Samoa count? I don't know within that 79. Who knows? One of the problems we've had with this press release is that it's big on sound bites, it's small on detail. So one of the things I'm trying to do is trying to figure out what are those 110 games, who are they going to play, and where are they going to be played. So let's break it down and see what there is. Guaranteed 6 Tier 2 games in the November window against the 6 nation sides. Well, that's been happening anyway, but it's good that it's going to be guaranteed to go on an annual basis. So that means that we've found 54 of the games. And I say 54 because the November window doesn't exist during the Rugby World Cup years. So that's 6 games over 9 years, 54 games. One thing to note here is that these 110 games does not include Rugby World Cup games as far as I can tell, because there are 24 Tier 1 versus Tier 2 games in a Rugby World Cup, which would be 72 games over this time span, which obviously would blow out of the water that 110 number. So this looks like games outside of Rugby World Cups between Tier 1 and Tier 2 nations. So just as a kind of note. So the 6 nations in the November window will play 54 games over this period. Next up, the Southern Hemisphere will host Tier 2 games in July. Now, what hasn't been said there, or when reading the Sydney Morning Herald, what they were suggesting was that these games would be in the year after a Rugby World Cup, because the Northern Hemisphere sides, the 6 nation side, are only going to tour for 2 games, not for 3. So, according to the what was suggested in the Sydney Morning Herald was that blank game would be filled with Tier 2 nations. If so, that's the July window. So that gets us up to 66 of the 110. The other piece, and this is the so that's the games that will be hosted by Tier 1 nations. The other piece that was bigged up was that Tier 2 nations would get to host Tier 1 teams, which is fantastic news. It's one of the things I've been saying that Tier 2 nations really need to be able to grow their game. Part of the revenue piece, so when Samoa or Fiji go to play England at Twickenham, for example, they don't get any share of the gate. They get a very small amount of money. It's one of the things that New Zealand's been complaining about. But the assumption when that was agreed was that they would make money when they got visited. But obviously, if you don't get visited, you don't get the return game, you don't get the return chance to make any money. So let's see what the Tier 2 nations hosting. The Six Nations sides have said they will go and play a game in Romania and Georgia during the July window. Now this sounds like every year. I'm expecting it to not include Rugby World Cup years. So that's 2 games, and it's over 9 years. So that's another 18 games there. Also, we've had announced that England and France will tour the Pacific Islands. Now, I'm assuming they will play all 3 of the Pacific Islands. So that's another 6 games. So that looks like 24 games that the Tier 2 nations will get to host, guaranteed during this next window. All of that adds up to 90 games so far. Which leaves us with 20 games that I don't know what will happen. So a comment here, possible Pacific Islands Super Rugby team would help financing those national teams. Absolutely, and that's a separate topic that I'm happy to talk about at another time, but yes, a Super Rugby side in Fiji would be fantastic for that. Because I've got a lot to get through today. So that's 90 games out of the 110, so there's 20 left. If we break those down though, the Rugby Championship sides are only going to do 12 of those 90 games. The remaining 78 are all Six Nations games. Six Nations have also stepped up previously and have been hosting Tier 2 games during the November windows. The Rugby Championship sides really don't appear to be stepping up and doing their bit for Tier 2 nations in as far as playing test matches goes. Argentina have done a fantastic job with the America's Rugby Championship, and South Africa have taken Namibia into the Vodacom Cup, which is a domestic competition. We're also seeing Fiji joining the NRC in Australia, the Australian domestic competition. So I'm not saying the Rugby Championship sides aren't doing anything, but as far as playing test matches go, they really don't seem to be stepping up to the plate here. So that leaves 20 games left. They have said that Japan, USA and Canada will also get to host Tier 1 teams. How many, who, when, is all, there is no details behind that. One of the other things they've also said is there will be a meritocracy-based system, so that after the Rugby World Cups, if a Tier 2 nation has stepped up that isn't already currently sort of qualified for the Rugby World Cup, such as, say, a Germany or a Russia or a Spain, who seem to be the most likely ones, then they will get the opportunity to play Tier 1 teams as well, which is good. But yes, as I say, there are 20 games that I can't figure out where they'll be played. It will include those Japan, USA and Canada there. So that's probably going to be around sort of 5 to 10 of those games, and that leaves 10 games totally up in the air at the moment as to where or who they might be played. But even if the Southern Hemisphere footed all of that, we'd still be seeing only 32 from the Southern Hemisphere compared to, as I say, 78 from the Six Nations sides. So that's where I think the game's going to be played. That's how I think the 110 games breaks down. So in conclusion, there is no pathway for Tier 2 nations to become Tier 1. That's the big hole. We are seeing an increase in games, but it seems to be mainly the Six Nations teams stepping up, and the Rugby Championship teams could be doing a lot more. The Rugby Championship teams, as I've said in the previous article, play more Test matches than the Six Nations teams. They play around about 14 compared to the Six Nations, which would be between 10 and 12. So to suggest that none of those games could be a Tier 2-1 does seem to be a bit of a stretch. And that whilst it is an improvement, this looks to me to be fantastic for Georgia and Romania, who have got guaranteed annual games. No other country seems to have managed to get themselves annual games. I think that is the real big stepping block that these Tier 2 nations need. Thank you very much for those who have been on live and who have added in comments or questions. It is very much appreciated. If you have enjoyed this and you're on Twitter, then please do share, retweet this or share this with your followers. If you're on YouTube, please give it the old thumbs up. That's always nice to see. Also, do sign up for my weekly newsletter. In Twitter, the link is in the title, and in YouTube, the link is in the notes below. So, thank you very much for watching, and I will be back tomorrow with another video giving my opinion on various things in rugby.